Hi, welcome to User's Guide to the Soul. We're just going live on Facebook as we like to do. So just getting ready to go live on Facebook. And now we're live on Facebook. So welcome to User's Guide to the Soul. Please feel free to join our Zoom class that's here in virtual space. And if you'd like to add comments, I will certainly bring your questions into the class, into the conversation. So welcome to User's Guide to the Soul. I'm watching for comments on my own Facebook page. And today, there you are. So just put comments right here. Comments. If you'd like to join us, we're most welcome to join along with us. We are learning possibly the most impactful kabbalistic text in the Jewish world. Possibly the text, of course, the Zohar is the big one, but if you're looking for a text that has impacted how people live in the Jewish world, I'm not sure you can find a more prominent one than the Tanya. We're also in a very core section of the Tanya, so amazing tools to learn how to be a higher functioning soul, to integrate soul and body. I think everyone in our class will agree this is a beautiful blueprint to really give your life a jump start, if you like. And we've been looking at the idea of a dira b'tachtonim, a home for God here in the lowest world. We start in chapter 35 by really reframing the whole lens of how we view a mitzvah. And that a mitzvah is not just a beautiful traditional thing we do as Jews, which it is, but it also is something that is completely surrendered to the Ein Sof, more than any soul could be surrendered. And so when we engage in a mitzvah, because the mitzvah is so surrendered to the Ein Sof, that's what allows the Shekhinah to dwell over our heads. And the mitzvah, physical mitzvah, is described as the oil that lets us, the wick, have the light of the Shekhinah dwelling over our heads, because we're like the forefathers and foremothers. We're like a chariot. We're so surrendered through the surrender of the mitzvah. Then in chapter 36, we learned about this concept of a dira b'tachtonim, which is a home for God, specifically here in the lowest aspect of creation, the physical world. And that's the whole point of things. All this stuff about a messianic era and perfecting the world, it's all done not by the higher side of my soul, not by my lofty side or my divine soul. It's done through my animal soul, through the lowest aspect of myself, and by me connecting specifically to physical mitzvahs and doing them. And that's how we refine our share of the world. And now in 37, we're looking at the mechanics of how that works, and it's quite extraordinary to see it in play, because hard to imagine how a small group like the Jews can manage to elevate the whole world such that we encounter this time in history called the Messianic era, where everything is spiritual, where there's just pure oneness. That's the most obvious part of reality. Hard to imagine this tiny group of Jews could somehow elevate the whole world just on our own. So we go through and we see, first of all, reiterating that the Messianic era that Reformed Judaism as well is working towards depends on each of us fulfilling our share of the work of elevating a piece of the world through the mitzvahs. And then we look at how that works with the actual objects we do the mitzvah with. So the oil for the Chanukiah for next week, we're going to elevate that physical part of the world, the actual oil and the wicks and the metal in the Chanukiyot. But then also, the power of my animal soul that's doing the mitzvah is also elevated and united with the Ein Sof. So there's another circle. And then even bigger than that, we see, Torah study also counts as a proto-action because we're moving our lips. So that also elevates some of the world. And then an even bigger circle, what's charging my body? What's powering it? The body that's doing these mitzvahs, that's all the food and drink, right? The tea that I'm having this morning with a nice blessing, that's going in and becoming energy in my body. So the water that came in, the herbs in my nice chai tea, all that stuff gets gathered in and also elevated as part of this process. And finally, we see that there are 600,000 general souls in Judaism, and the world has actually been sliced up into folders. Each one of us has their own folder, and 1/600,000th of the world is there for us to elevate and is actually being delivered to us by divine providence. So this all the herbs that are in this cup of tea, to my physical eyes, it looks pretty random. They just came from wherever. But if you could look from the point of view of Kabbalah, the eyes of the core of your soul, you'd see there's a loving system that has gathered all these sparks to bring them to me, and they always had my name on them. They were always in my folder, and it's my job. And by the way, we looked at the idea of a general soul also having many sparks. So each one of us may be part of a larger soul system, but there's 600,000 general souls. And my general soul system is responsible for that folder of work. And once we all do that, we elevate the world. And in fact, because the mechanics work that I am just elevating these objects by elevating myself, it's just automatic. Once every Jew has elevated every part of their soul, their share of the world comes up with them, and any negative and the whole coarse physical side of the world just deflates, as it were, and it becomes a different quality. Still a physical world, but just part of the oneness. It's something you can't imagine with your physical brain, but we work towards it. So that brings us up to speed. Any questions on that? Sheila, Leon on Facebook, let me know. Any questions on that? That's a lot. But we're now going to pick up in the Tanya, the bottom of page 511.
Each spark did not descend into this world to perfect itself, but to perfect the body and vital soul, as the Alter Rebbe will soon conclude.
And this is the essence of the counterintuitive flip, where we think the important part of ourself is our divine soul, the important part of ourself is our lofty side, and my negative side I should forget about, I should maybe crush it or whatever it is. No, the Alter Rebbe says it's your animal soul. That's the piece that's actually working. It's your animal soul that's elevating the world. It's not your divine soul. In fact, your divine soul does not need any fixing or any changing, although my hair needs some fixing. Have you ever tried to fix your hair on Zoom?
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard because it's like a mirror image. There's got to be a word for that at this point, for like this trying to fix your hair on Zoom. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it. Good enough? Call that fixed. Sorry. So it's not my divine soul that needs to be fixed. It's only my animal soul that needs to be fixed. And my divine soul did not come down here for fixing. It does get elevated through its activities in the world, it's true. But in terms of tikkun, fixing, it's only the animal soul we need to focus on. And when the animal soul is fixed, now I've elevated my share of the world. V'hu mamash dugmat sod galut hashchina levarer nitzotzin v'chulu.
Is entirely dependent on our drawing down his godliness and the blessed Ein Sof light upon the 248 limbs of the vital soul of all Israel. For by way of the vital soul, all the world will be suffused with godliness. And this is achieved by the vital soul's performance of all the 248 positive mitzvot.
Sorry, I think either I skipped a page or you skipped a page. Right?
I skipped.
I'm sorry,
I went back one.
Let's go top of 512. Let me catch us up.
Okay.
Shehi Yerida Gdola Uvchina Galut Mamash, top of 512.
Okay. Though it is indeed a great descent, a veritable exile for the soul.
And now we get to a. Remember how we said these chapters are the consolation for the Beinoni? That if you look at the whole picture of the Tanya, and that we're sitting having an audience with the Alter Rebbe, and he said, if when you learn this, it's like you're sitting with me, literally. You're really with me. So we've gone through, we've learned the structure of the soul, we've learned how to be a Beinoni, we've learned the long short path and the short long path. We've learned how to deal with depression and make sure we're always in a joyful state so we can do this most effectively. But then the question hits us, well, if I can never become a tzaddik, If my max is a Bainani, then why? Why? I mean, did the Alter Rebbe just invent this Judaism 101 for me, and the Tzaddik is Judaism 401, or I'm an undergrad and the Tzaddik is doing a PhD, or whatever we're going to call it? Am I really going to be doing this demoted Judaism all my life of just struggling but never transforming myself into a Tzaddik? So these chapters are there to answer that question and show us the whole purpose, why it is we're doing this. And here, he focuses on exactly that question. He says, no, it's not that you have Judaism 101 and the Tzaddik is Judaism 401 or anything like that. Nobody's soul needed repair. The Tzaddik's divine soul didn't need repair, and your divine soul doesn't need repair. And if you want to know how the Tzaddik and how you are going to do the purpose of Judaism, which is bringing the Messianic era, it's exactly the same. The Tzaddik came down here not to repair their divine soul. The Tzaddik came down here to do physical mitzvahs, right? To pour the oil into the Chanukiah and light it. And why did you come down here as a Bainani with all your struggling? To do physical mitzvahs, to pour the oil into the Chanukiah and light it. Because the Tzaddik can't elevate the world and make a Dira B'Tachtonim other than by doing physical mitzvahs. And same thing with the Bainani. And that's the whole purpose of all of creation, was for us to do that. Not to create souls that are lofty. That wasn't the point of creation. The point of creation was to create a home for God in the physical, at the bottom of creation, not at the top. Because the top does not impress God. The top is nothing new, as we said. The most spiritual part of the universe is still just non-existent to God. There's no difference between the highest spiritual world and the physical world. It's all the same thing. It's only here where there seems to be no light, no spirituality. That's where something new can be created. And it's the same for all of us. The Tzaddik and the Bainani have to do physical mitzvahs to make a Dira B'Tachtonim. And that's the whole point. So there's no room for our inferiority complex, right? The Bainani that's come to the Alter Rebbe and said, but really, that's the best I get to do is just, struggle to, do physical mitzvahs with as much joy as I can. And the Alter Rebbe says, right, just like me, just like the Tzaddik. That's Judaism, and that's the whole point of the universe. So let's go inside. Let me see if there's any questions on Facebook. I'm watching you guys. Hi, Emily. Yes, so Jeffrey, let me know any comments. We'll definitely have you guys come and join us. Ki gam sheyeh tzadik gamur, oved Hashem b'yira ve'ava rabba b'tanugim.
For even if it becomes in this world a perfect tzaddik, serving God with fear and delighting in it and abounding love of Him.
All right, so we heard about this rare soul that can refine itself until it's at the level of a tzaddik. So, okay, even if you have one of those souls and you work years and years and you get yourself to the level of a tzaddik where you have basically no ego anymore, you just have two divine souls. Lo yagia lemalo devekuto b'Hashem b'tchilu rechimu b'terem yiridato la'olam hazeh achumri lo mina v'lo miktzata.
It will not attain to the quality of its attachment to God with fear and love that the soul experienced prior to its descent into this corporeal world, or even to a fraction of its earlier fear and love.
This is the difference between the Bainani, or just a normal person who struggles, and a tzaddik who can completely refine themselves. It's in their emotions. A tzaddik is able to take all that self-centered drive of the animal soul and transform it so it's like another other-centered soul. And I don't care anymore about, how good brownies taste or what TV shows I like to watch. All I care about is how can I help other people. A tzaddik will have transformed their whole drive. But no matter how much love a tzaddik has for helping other people or for God, no matter how much fear they have, no matter how much they've refined their emotional body, so to speak, it's nothing compared to how their soul felt love and awe outside of a body. Right? It's nowhere near the level that their soul had of emotions for God before it came down. So obviously that's not the point. A tzaddik didn't come down to experience that great love of God and that great awe that they are able to accomplish, that they can transform in their animal soul. Yeah, I can look at that and say, why can't I do that? You know, I'm just a Bainani, and I still like brownies more than I like Gemara, right? Well, the tzaddik is here not for the point of experiencing those emotions. That's not the way they serve God. Yeah, it's part of their makeup. Okay, that's part of who they are psychologically. But if the point of a tzaddik were to experience emotions, God would have left them in heaven, where, as he says, their emotions are infinitely more profound, infinitely more powerful. They're not having to work through a physical body, and they're not coming out, all processed, even the way a tzaddik does. So that wasn't the point for the tzaddik to begin with. I shouldn't think that's the core of Judaism or reality. Does that make sense? This is a key point. I want to open up to questions here in the class. Do you see what the Alter Rebbe is saying?
We talked about this last week. So why do we strive so much to become a Bainani or a tzaddik if they're all doing basically the same thing? If our purpose is all the same, to do mitzvahs and to be elevated.
Yeah, because if I'm not a Bainani, that means I'm missing mitzvahs. Right, and if I don't work on my emotions and meditate using the long short path we've described, now my mitzvahs are not going to rise up to the level they should. I'm not going to finish my work elevating the world. So I need to keep working to be a Bainani so I actually get my work done. I need to keep meditating to create godly emotions so that the work that I do gets saved on the big hard drive, so to speak, as we talked about. But the whole point of the work is not so that I can feel like I'm a spiritual person and I have these amazing emotions. The point is to make a home for God here in the physical world, right? It's God's pleasure I need to worry about, and it's God's home I need to build. So yeah, we still want to do the work, but the work wasn't the point. The home was the point. Does that make sense? Oh no, he's wiggling his head. He's not. What am I missing? Yeah, Eleanor?
Yeah, I've been slowly doing the earlier videos, and I'm on like number 30, and I think it's like around chapter 14 to 15 to 16.
Yeah.
And they talk about, well, the word truth is and that everybody's truth is their own truth, and everybody has their own levels to reach. And that everybody is good is what I got out of it. And whatever you're doing is okay.
Yes, so that's a different approach, and it's you're right, Eleanor. It's doing the same thing. It's giving the Bainani a sense that even though their work that they're doing is nothing like a level of a tzaddik, rest assured that God has something called truth that applies at every level. And so even at my level where I'm struggling and, how can I say I'm really serving God in truth, there's a truth at my level that's still truths. So that was another sort of comforting model to give to the Bainani that's worried about, well, are they never going to make the grade? Are they never going to become a tzaddik? But this is a different approach. Here he's saying it's not about the tzaddik's truth is one truth and your truth is another truth. It's all the physical mitzvah. That's the whole point. And when a tzaddik puts a coin in a box and I put a coin in a box, those two coins are just now part of the tzedakah that was given, and tzedakah is tzedakah, and that's making a home for God. And the tzaddik, doesn't matter what emotions they put in, the whole point was to actually put the coin in. And me, with my maybe weaker emotions and a little bit of self-centeredness mixed in there that I got to watch out for, I put the coin in, and we both made a home for God, and that's the point. So I shouldn't feel like my coin is a deficient coin, and the tzaddik's coin is the holy coin. The coins don't absorb holiness.
So are you saying that?
It actually is. It's a different point. Yeah.
But you're saying that the tzaddik would automatically put the coin in, but the Rosh or the Bainani may say, well, maybe not today. Is that what you're trying to say?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
But the point is the coin. Yes, Noreen. One lad. Let's do.
We were talking. I was questioning a while back about the labels. If you got rid of the labels, this whole issue would be gone. I mean, why label people Bainoni tzaddik?
Well, that's what I was trying to say.
The point is making doing the mitzvah, what's the difference with the labels? Who does that serve?
Yeah, I think you're talking about different questions, right? So if we're talking about understanding the whole philosophy, that's where the Alter Rebbe is saying, Tzaddik, Bain, it doesn't matter. The whole point, Russia, whatever, the whole point is doing a mitzvah. So if it's all the same. So I hear you. Basically, the labels don't matter at that point, because in the tzedakah box, my dollar and Tzaddik's dollar, they sit there and they both do the same thing. They're both making a home for God. So you're right in that sense. But from the perspective of improving myself, from the perspective of doing my own avodah and my own spiritual work, which is not so much the topic of this chapter, now I do need the labels because I need to know where am I starting. And we tend not to be honest with ourselves, and we tend to think, oh, maybe I'm a tzaddik, or I'm a Bainani, or I'm a this or that. And it's hard to sit down and look at your life and say, here's the page of mistakes I've made. Here's the page of qualities I'd like to improve. Here's, the few things that I think I've gotten really right. And let me move from category to category. Let me try and, take the counterproductive stuff and make it productive stuff. And for that work, I think the labels, when I'm looking at myself, or perhaps someone that's come to me, children who've been sent to me by God, or a student, there it's helpful to say, in this category of life, I'm basically a Rasha. In this category, maybe I'm almost a Bainani. Maybe there's some little category where I'm like a tzaddik, where I love doing Judaism and I rush to do it, and it's for other people, and I function perfectly. I don't know. But it's really good when you're working on yourself to have these labels, in my opinion. Otherwise, we don't know where we want to progress. But we digress.
Cantor,
Right. Yes?
I'm thinking that if you didn't keep working to get yourself up to being the Bani, you would be still a Rasha, and that would be a bad thing to be. So I think it is, you have to work on your own personality as well as doing these mitzvahs out in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. These are touchstones to tell us where we're at and where we want to get to. Very good. Let's go on. So ve'ein erech v'dimion beinehem klal kanoda lechol maskil she'aguf eino yachol lisbol chulu.
In fact, there is no comparison or similarity whatsoever between them, between the love and fear of God experienced by the soul on earth and that of the soul above. For as is obvious to every intelligent man, the body could not bear, etc., a love and fear of such intensity as the soul experienced above in the spiritual realms.
So when we're in a physical body, everything is very muted. And even at tzaddik, he seems to be saying, if they were, while still in a physical body, able to fully experience the love for God and awe of God that they experienced when they were a soul in heaven, they couldn't bear it. There's no the body can't process that level of emotional light and emotional power. It has to be downgraded even for a tzaddik. So I shouldn't feel like that's the purpose. I shouldn't feel like, well, if I can't be a tzaddik with their love and their awe, then what's the point? That's not the point for them. Clear? Ela yiridato la'olam hazeh. Why did they come down? Lahitlabesh baguf hanefesh hachiyonit hu kedei litaknam bilvad.
But its descent into this world, to be clothed in a body and vital soul, is for the sole purpose of perfecting them.
So why did they come down? Not to experience the level of love we're talking about, Ava Shebetanugim, if you learned that with us, but rather to be clothed in the body, to be clothed in the animal soul, and to repair them and to perfect them. So even though this whole book is about being a Bainani by balancing my divine soul and my animal soul, and it's all about the divine soul must be in charge, the divine soul is always going to be thinking, speaking, and acting. The animal soul is just following orders from the divine soul. I want to limit the ability of my animal soul to direct my thought, speech, and action, etc. In the end, what's the whole point of it? Not for the divine soul, but for the animal soul. When I perfect the animal soul, what happens? As we've learned, all the food and drink that I ate that went into energy, all the objects I use, all you know, all the whole supporting cast of that mitzvah gets elevated, wrapped up, and its vital essence is united with the Ein Sof. And now I am elevating my share of the world and making a home for God in that share of the world. And it happens through the animal soul. And just by working on myself and my animal soul, I fulfill the point of the world, which is elevating the world so there's a home for God in the world, in the physical world. And the beauty is, as we've learned, it's automatic. Each one of us has a slice, and just by improving myself and having discipline, now I'm just gathering up sparks in the world and elevating them and creating a light home for God, where the light of the Shekhinah is actually shining over the world. ולהפרידה מהרע של שלוש קליפות הטמאות על ידי שמירת שסה לא תעשה וענפיהם.
To separate them from the evil of the three impure kalipot by observing the 365 prohibitions and their offshoots, that is, by observing the biblical and rabbinic prohibitions.
Right, and there is how we deal with the negative side, the counterproductive side of the world. In Judaism, you don't have to actually destroy the world, struggle with the world. All you have to do is work on yourself through Torah and mitzvahs, and your share of the world is going to be elevated to holiness. And when we've all done it, as we've said, that was the way the physical world was getting its energy anyways. The klipa, the physical side of reality, was being fed through the klipa noga, through this intermediary level, by my counterproductive behaviors. So I let energy come through the klipa noga, and that was feeding the three impure klipot of the world that we described. When I elevate my share and the klipa gets elevated, now there's no way for the three impure klipot to plug in at all, and they just deflate automatically. So really, it's once we master ourselves, we find that the problem vanishes, and the world is a different place entirely. ולהעלות נפשו החיונית עם חלקה השייך לה מכללות עולם הזה.
And to elevate his vital soul together with the portion of the world at large that relates to it.
Right? So I'm elevating my soul, and I'm also sweeping up my whole share of the world, that whole folder with all my sparks. Hey, Ella. My whole folder with all my sparks is being elevated as I just work on myself. ולקשרם ולאחדם באור אין סוף ברוך הוא אשר ימשיך בהם על ידי קיומו כל רמ"ח מצוות עשה בנפשו החיונית.
Binding and uniting them with the Ein Sof light, which he draws into them by performing all of the 248 positive mitzvot through the agency of the vital soul.
And as we said, each one of the mitzvahs is like an aspect of the light of the Ein Sof, and also has something like an organ in my soul. And I have these 248 organs in my spiritual being that couple with the Ein Sof light. And then when I elevate my soul, I elevate my portion of the world. And a little more backup footnotes here. כמו שכתוב בעץ חיים שער כ"ו, כי הנשמה עצמה אינה צריכה תיקון כלל וכו'.
You skipped one, I think.
Oh, sorry. You're right. שהיא המקיימת כל מצוות מעשיות כנזכר לעיל.
Since the vital soul is the one that performs all mitzvot involving action, as explained above in chapter 36, that the divine soul can activate the body in performance of the mitzvot only by way of the vital soul.
All right, so if you need more backup, that the whole point is about the animal soul doing this stuff and doing the physical mitzvahs, remember that the divine soul can't pick up your match and light the shamash on Hanukkah. It can't move the hand. It can't pour the oil. It can't carry the Chanukiah out of the storage, to put it on a table next to your door. It's only the animal soul that can do that. we are shooting a lot of video for services at Temple, and so you spend a lot of time looking out and seeing, there's a camera with a camera person, then there's the director, and it's funny because you see the different levels of control that happen, right? And there's this camera that is pointed at us, that's recording us, and then there's a camera person that's controlling the camera, and then there's a director who's actually the one that's sculpting this whole thing, but the director has to say to the camera person, point it here, point it there, focus here, I want this, I want that. The whole perspective that you're seeing, although the director's responsible for it, the director's not actually physically pointing anything. And it's a little like that for the divine soul. The divine soul really wants to light that Chanukiah. It has to go to the camera person and say, okay, point camera there, focus on Chanukiah, now do that. And it really is a second-hand, third-party process where the divine soul has to get the animal soul's attention, get its participation, get it to move the hand, but it's only the animal soul that can do it. It's that clear. The divine soul is spiritual. It can't move around physical stuff. It can't power the body, the physical body. So it's really all about the animal soul and elevating the animal soul to perfect the world, not the divine soul. And we went on since it's likewise written in Eitz Chaim 26 that the divine soul itself does not need perfecting. The divine soul does not need perfecting. So again, if I think it's all about my divine soul, that's the whole point. My divine soul could have stayed in heaven. It's not changed intrinsically. It's not fixed by coming down to earth. It's elevated by its journey, but it didn't need repair like the animal soul. And the divine soul can't elevate any share of the world because it's only by fixing the animal soul that we do that. And the divine soul does not need fixing. ולא הוצרכה להתלבש בעולם הזה וכולו, רק להמשיך אור לתקנם וכולו. And there's no need. Somebody, I wasn't on gallery view. Do you know who's reading next? Can someone help us out? Oh, Paula, go ahead. You're muted.
Embodied in the, except to draw down light to perfect them, the vital soul and the body.
That's it. There's no need for the divine soul to be embodied in this world for itself. The only reason it's embodied is to draw down light to perfect the animal soul and the body. והוא ממש דוגמת סוד גלות השכינה לברר ניצוצין וכולו. Are we back at the top with Susan now?
And this parallels exactly the mystery of the exile of the Shechianu, whose purpose is to refine the sparks of holiness which fell into the Keli pot. So too does the divine soul enter into exile within the body and vital soul in order to perfect them and to extract them from the sparks of holiness which they contain.
So this is a big chunk. We haven't talked a lot about the exile of the Shekhinah and the mystery of that. But everything mirrors everything else. So just like our divine soul, all it wants to do is help other people and do Jewish things and godly things. And yet it finds itself here enclosed in an animal soul, having to deal with the psychology and the ego of the animal soul. And the animal soul wakes up and says, I want to do stuff for me. And the divine soul has to give energy to that and allow that to happen, even against its will. The animal soul might yell at somebody or steal something, and the divine soul is actually enlivening that and allowing that to happen because it's like in exile. It's going along for the ride, and it's so painful for the divine soul when the animal soul takes over and just does its thing. And it's a little strange that the divine soul, which is so much more powerful, could be trapped and overcome, so to speak, by this little animal soul. But that's the wonder of how we've been merged in this body, a divine soul and an animal soul, and how here in our physical body it seems like it's an even fight between them. Same thing in the cosmic picture is with the Shekhinah, which is creating a physical world, and in that physical world are things happening that are hated, antithetical to the Ein Sof, to God. Right? That a child should go hungry, that the environment should be destroyed, that people fight wars, all this stuff happening, and the Shekhinah is just there saying, yeah, I'm enlivening this, I'm creating this, godly energy is sustaining this, and the hand that might pull the trigger and do something horrible is being enlivened by the Shekhinah as it's happening, and God's looking at it all with perfect knowledge and saying, "Oi," right? So how could the Shekhinah be trapped in a world doing the opposite of what it wants? If God is infinitely powerful, that's a mystery. So it's the same thing. Our animal soul needs to be tamed so that the divine soul can direct it to elevate the world. The same way, the world itself as a whole needs to be tamed so the Shekhinah can really be creating a world in the way that it would like, not a world that is full of conflict. Before we go on to the next section, which is, I love the next section. It all talks about the specific mitzvah of tzedakah and how tzedakah, charity, we don't call it charity because charity is, we'll talk about how it's really the wrong word for tzedakah. It's one of the most mistranslated words in Judaism because tzedakah means righteousness. It's just what you have to do. But how tzedakah is the epitome of this dynamic of elevating the world to Kedusha. And if that's the point of the world and the point of a mitzvah, tzedakah accomplishes that mitzvah like no other, with incredible power, with incredible scope. And it has a unique place in the mitzvahs in terms of this dynamic of elevating the world and elevating each of our share of the world. But we should know there's actually a wonderful date coming up. We have all these, if you've been with us for a while, we have my kids joke that I'm always talking about the next special holiday, the next strange day, and then they say, oh, it's the holiest day of the year, right? Because, of course, each one is the holiest day of the year when it's arriving. But this one really is, for this system of Kabbalah, for Chabad Hasidus, it's actually called the Rosh Hashanah of Chabad Hasidus. That's coming up, Yud Tes Kislev. And it's Friday night and Saturday. It's actually 2 days, but Yud Tes is the big one. And it's celebrated a little bit like Rosh Hashanah is for mainstream Judaism, call it. People that learn the Tanya annually, they learn it in a cycle, and the cycle begins over again on Saturday. So I'm learning the Tanya annually, and I'm getting to the end of the 5th volume, and we're going to start over again. And also there's big celebrations. In a normal year, there'd be what's called Verbrengens, where we'd be sitting around a table and we'd have maybe some scotch, and someone with a big gray beard might be telling some stories about Hasidim and the Alter Rebbe, and we'd be singing songs, and it can go on all night. And it really is it's seen as the same way Rosh Hashanah is a chance to start over for your soul. Yud Tes Kislev is as a way to start over your kabbalistic practice, so to speak, a way to start fresh and start at a new level. So let me tell you just a bit about what are the events that we're marking on Yud Tes Kislev. So as you know, the Alter Rebbe was one of many students of the Maggid Mizrich, who was the main student of the Baal Shem Tov, the first Hasidic master. And most of the other students of the Maggid taught Hasidus in kind of the same way the Maggid taught it. It was about the heart, and God wanted service of the heart, and a peasant who was just serving with their whole heart, that was as holy as a scholar that served with incredible genius and learning hours and hours a day. And yet, the Alter Rebbe started explaining things in very intellectual ways, and bringing it from a service mainly of the heart to a service one can understand with one's mind. If you've been with us, you surely see that these explanations are very clear, very crystallized. You can map them out in your mind. You can create charts, and you can kind of get a sense of it. And the other Hasidim had a little problem with this. That you're just putting too much out there. That's not how you teach Hasidus. You can't just explain it to everybody. It's got to be given over in a certain way. It's beyond that. And unfortunately, there was also tension within the Jewish world, the wider world, and there was a big struggle between the Hasidic community and the more scholarly community, which was called the Mitnagdim. They were against Hasidus. And at some point, someone spread a libel about the Alter Rebbe, and he actually got arrested and imprisoned by the Tsar, and really had a death sentence that he was looking at in terms of his trial. And he was taken off, and he was put in jail and not treated in a very good way. You can read all about it. And at one point, when he was in his prison cell, he was visited by the souls of the Maggid Mizrich and the Baal Shem Tov. And this is a normal thing for the Rebbes, the teachers of this tradition, is that some past Rebbe will come to them in a dream and, give them, notes on a maimar they gave, and then someone else will come and give them notes on those notes. So he was visited by his teacher and his teacher's teacher, and he asked them, what's going on? What's the deal with his imprisonment? What does it represent spiritually? And the Maggid and the Baal Shem Tov told him, well, you've created a case in heaven as well. There's not just a case on earth, there's a case in heaven. There's a big question being raised in heaven, whether you're teaching too much, teaching too clearly, putting too much out there, whether there's a problem sharing all these godly ideas in the way that you're doing it, so intellectually. And they told him, if you win the case in heaven, if it turns out that you were right, and this is what the world needs the Tanya and Chabad Hasidus that really uses the intellect instead of just the heart, then you'll know because you'll be freed. Whereas if it's the opposite, you won't be freed, God forbid. Right? And just a few days later, the Alter Rebbe got word that he was completely exonerated and they let him go. And so that, the Alter Rebbe being freed really from a death sentence, was celebrated with incredible joy that year and marked the next year. But there was also a change in that now the Alter Rebbe knew heaven gave a stamp of approval to his style of teaching the Baal Shem Tov's Hasidus and the Maggid's Hasidus, and he actually started teaching Hasidus in a much more intellectually expanded way. There's really there's the Alter Rebbe's Hasidus before Petersburg and after Petersburg, and after we get these much more elaborate explanations and the kind of text you're looking at here, which ultimately led to the Tanya, ultimately led to this really a blueprint for how to use Kabbalah to elevate your life, even if you're just a normal Jew. So before we jump in and start this next section, let me give it's not schnapps, it's tea, but let me give a l'chaim to everybody watching. If you're with us, I wish you a beautiful, beautiful Yud Tes Kislev, that you should have experienced a revelation of the core of your soul and how it's completely one with God, and that all your study should lead to beautiful things this year at Temple Israel or wherever you are. We really want to see you part of elevating the world and really really fulfilling your share of this mission of elevating the world. So l'chaim on my chai tea. Beautiful. Just give me one moment. Hey, Cedar, I'm teaching a class, so I don't know. Thanks. My son just got a break from school, so I've got company down here in my studio with my amazing son, Cedar. So let's go on. And this really, if the Alter Rebbe had many chidushim, many new approaches that he brought, the last Rebbe of the Alter Rebbe system, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, this is a chidush of his in terms of focus. This next section we're going to learn about has been in the Tanya for 7 generations of people that have been learning this system. And they all knew that tzedakah is a particularly potent way to fulfill the purpose of reality. But I don't think any of the Rebbes focused on it with such laser intensity as the last one, to the extent that that was how he interacted with almost everyone in the Jewish world. If you've ever seen videos of Menachem Mendel Schneerson, when he'd come out in his very, very late years in his life, he'd stand for hours and hours as anyone that wanted to visit him came by, and what would he do? He'd give them $1 for them to give to charity. So that was the one thing, if he had 3 seconds with one person in his life who was a Jew from somewhere that he would never see again, had never seen before, what did he do with that 3 seconds as they passed him by and looked at his eyes and got his smile? He gave them $1 for them to give to charity, and they both had a share in that mitzvah. And he also taught in many ways that how powerful the mitzvah of tzedakah was in terms of our mission's generation of elevating the world. We'll talk about some of that as we go on. Any questions about Yud Tes Kislev or anything we just talked about? Mindy! Hi, Mindy. So glad you're watching. Let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, I'm looking for comments. ובזה יובן מה שהפליגו רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה, במאוד מאוד במעלת הצדקה, ואמרו ששקולה כנגד כל המצוות.
In light of the above, where it was explained that the distinctive quality of the active mitzvot lies in their elevating effect on the body and vital soul, we can understand why our sages so greatly extolled the virtue of charity, declaring it equal to all the other mitzvot together.
So now we looked at what a mitzvah is and gone through 2 3/4 chapters of how a mitzvah is completely surrendered to God in the way nothing else can be, even in our soul. The way a mitzvah is the oil that allows the Shekhinah to dwell over our heads. Now that we've seen how powerful a mitzvah is in creating a home for God here as the purpose for creation, now let's look at tzedakah, which is such a powerful mitzvah. The sages said it's equal to all the other mitzvot combined. And I know the math doesn't work because, as we'll see soon, and we've seen, Torah study is also equal to the other mitzvot combined. So if this one equals everything and this one equals everything, now you get this you get a paradox. But let's leave out the math, because generally Hasidus and Kabbalah is not mathematically. It won't always compute, so to speak, to our mathematical side. But why is it that tzedakah is so powerful that we say it's all the mitzvahs you can do that all have this effect of creating a home for God in the world? Why is it that tzedakah is so powerful it's like all of them combined? And how does that relate to the whole purpose of reality as we've been learning? Uvechol Talmud Yushalmi hi nikret b'shem mitzvah stam, ki kach haya hergel halashon likrot tzedakah b'shem mitzvah stam.
In all the Jerusalem Talmud, charity is called simply the commandment, for such was the idiomatic expression commonly used to refer to charity, the commandment.
Right, so just like the Amidah is called, tefillah, it's called prayer. So charity is just called mitzvah, right? If you said, I really love giving charity, you just say, I love the mitzvah. And they know you're talking about charity because charity is such a big mitzvah and so all-inclusive that they would just call it mitzvah. That was their term for charity. So why is that? מפני שהיא עיקר המצוות מעשיות ועולה על כולנה. Eleanor, go ahead. Eleanor, we're on...
Okay, I got it. Because charity is the core of all mitzvot of action and surpasses them all.
So it's the core of all the other mitzvot and also achieves more than all the other mitzvot. We only understand this now that we see what the purpose of a mitzvah is. If the purpose of a mitzvah is to elevate the nefesh b'amit to kedusha and elevate the world, there's no other mitzvah that's as effective as tzedakah. Shekulan hen rak la'alot nefesh chiyonit l'shem shehi ha'mekayemet otan u'mitlabeshet bahen.
For the purpose of all these mitzvah is only to elevate one's animal soul to God, since it is this vital soul that performs them and clothes itself in them.
So the mitzvah is the process by which physicality, even though it's staying physical, becomes elevated to be united with the Ein Sof. And as we'll see, if that's the whole point of a mitzvah, nothing does that like charity. You're probably getting a sense of it just picturing what charity does, but the Alter Rebbe will lay it out very clearly. Li kalel be'or Ein Sof Baruch Hu hamlubash bahen.
So as to be absorbed into the blessed Ein Sof light clothed in them.
ואין לך מצווה שנפש חיונית מתלבשת בה כל כך כבמצוות הצדקה.
Now you will find no other mitzvah in which the vital soul is clothed to the same extent as in the mitzvah of charity.
So why is that? We'll just start the section where he's going to the nuts and bolts here of what's special about tzedakah. שבכל המצוות אין מתלבש בהן רק כוח אחד מנפש החיונית בשעת מעשה המצווה לבד.
For all other mitzvot, only the faculty of the vital soul is closed. The faculty of action in the hand donning the tefillah or holding the etrog, and even the one facilitating the close of the mitzvah, only while the mitzvah is being performed.
So look at the mechanics of waving a lulav of an etrog or lighting Chanukiah. It's mainly my hands that are doing it. I'm not sure that my whole body, I might sway a little when I'm doing it, I'm not sure, but mainly it's my hands. Or, as we said, if we're learning Torah, that's my mouth moving. If I'm, name your mitzvah. But when you give charity, it's more than just that your hand is putting $1 in the box. How'd you get that $1? By your work, by your employment, which involves running around and traveling and thinking and speaking and rushing, and your whole body is involved in earning that $1. And so it's not just the energy that's in your hand, like the etrog, it's actually all the energy that you put into earning your livelihood. And for most of us who are working or have worked, think about all the time and all the energy in the day that goes, and all the sweat and all the emotions that go into earning that livelihood. And really the same thing that makes charity beautiful and great is what makes charity a little bit hard. I don't mean like giving a quarter, once a week. I mean, I'm giving to the point where now it's like, oh, there's something I won't be able to do if I give that 10%, right? 10%. So when you feel that, do I really want to write this check? That's when you know you've given tzedakah, right? When you've done the mitzvah. Because now it's hard to part with that money because I really put my whole self into that money, right? We all imagine if we won $1 billion or $10 million, we'd be able to just, start a fund and give millions to charity. It'd be so easy because we imagine it just landing in our lap. But when you actually have worked for money and you put yourself into it, now it takes a bit of a struggle for most people to write that check or put that $1 in the tzedakah box. And that's because I've put my whole self into it. So that's the first element, is that it's not just one aspect of my being, it's my whole vital soul, my whole physical being that I put into that money. And that wealth, when I give it tzedakah, it gathers up every aspect of my vital being and it elevates it. Unlike other mitzvahs, which might just affect one part of my vital being, one part of my body. There's one practice that I'm actually I'm taking on as part of learning and teaching this section of Tanya with you, and that is the last Rebbe of this system would actually instruct people to not just have a tzedakah box in every home and in their office and in a child's bedroom. He actually instructed people that they should affix a tzedakah to their house. So it was one thing to have the tzedakah sitting on the table. It was another to nail it to some section of your house, whether it's in the kitchen or wherever it is, and have it actually there now part of the house. And what is that? It's the difference between something happening in the house and something being the house. So often we have tapes of this last Rebbe specifically telling people, I need you to, he'd be talking to someone in a community. He'd say, have you got a tzedakah box in the synagogue? They'd say, yes. Is it nailed to the synagogue? They'd say no, and then they'd run home, and as soon as they got home, they get hammer nail. They nail that thing so it was part of the synagogue, and it was so much a focus of the last Rebbe of this system, because our role is this, to finish refining the world. That was a practice that tzedakah shouldn't just be something you do; it should be intrinsically a part of the structure of your home. So we ordered a beautiful tzedakah box, and we're gonna put it nicely over our fireplace, so that's where I can put my $1 in the morning when I start praying. But that's my invitation to anyone watching. If you'd like, get a nice tzedakah box, find a spot in the house, get a hammer nail, and make it a habit of putting a little bit of tzedakah in every day as a piece that is one and the same as your home, not just something in your home. So that's my invitation to you. Let's finish with a little bit of our meditation. We'll take just a couple minutes. Thanks to everyone who's joined us on Facebook. It's a pleasure having you, and also to anyone watching in the future on YouTube or elsewhere. This is our meditative system called the Long Short Path. And just let your breath release into its fullest form. Nice, slow, deep breathing. And let's open up your breath into 4 stages, each one a count of 4. So we'll breathe in, hold the breath in, breathe out, and hold the breath out as 4 stages. Together with me, breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Stay inflated, 2, 3, 4. Release the breath, 2, 3, 4. And stay emptied, 2, 3, 4. Continue again in, staying there, and out, staying there. As you continue that cycle, if you can, breathe through your nose with your mouth closed. That is optimal. And as you're breathing through your nose, pay attention to the temperature of the air coming in and out of your nose under your nostrils. As the air passes over your upper lip, pay attention to the temperature of the air. Cooler air coming in as you breathe in. Warm air passing over the same spot as you breathe out. Let's open up a wisdom gateway, which is the space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. That is our wisdom gateway in our meditation system. And place in that wisdom gateway this vision of what tzedakah, the mitzvah, is. Now, all the tzedakah we may have given this year, or we may give today, see how it collects all the energy of my share of the world and elevates it to God, and really see it being elevated in that wisdom gateway. Let that fill your mind, and then filling your mind inspire emotions as well. As we focus on the details of that divine concept, know that those emotions you're feeling of perhaps joy, or perhaps a little fear that maybe I haven't given enough tzedakah, those are the wings allowing the world to be elevated by our beautiful actions. There's lots and lots of benefit in remaining in this posture and letting this godly concept fill your mind, fill your wisdom gateway, so you can stay there for 15, 20 minutes if you like, or 5. If you're with me, our class is done, so please wiggle your fingers and toes and open your eyes. Thank you for joining us for this amazing chapter of the Tanya. Please be in touch with me if you have any questions. I'm available by email, Facebook. If you'd like to join our class, just email Maya at temple-israel.org. You can be here part of the conversation. And I wish you all a wonderful Shabbat, a wonderful Yotes Kislev. Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.